The Middle Ages knew no mercy. It was an age where justice was not a parchment sealed with wax, but a blade sharpened in blood. To fall under the judgment of king or council was not merely to lose one's life. It was to be unmade, your body broken, your honor erased, your very memory reshaped into a warning. Punishment was never quiet, never private. It was spectacle. It was theater. It was the crown's most powerful sermon. In the public squares of Europe, justice wore the face of cruelty. Great wooden wheels towered above the cobblestones, waiting to grind limbs into ruin. Iron cauldrons hissed with boiling oil, ready to consume flesh. Gallows loomed like skeletal trees, their ropes swinging in the wind as if eager for the next neck to stretch. And upon the scaffolds, blackened with years of spilt blood, the executioner stood as both servant and symbol, his axe or sword raised not simply to kill, but to instruct. Crowds gathered not only to witness, but to learn. For every scream was a sermon, every broken body a commandment written in agony. Children clung to their mothers, their eyes wide, too young to understand, yet too old to ever forget. Mothers covered their mouths not from surprise, for executions were common, but from the horror of seeing humanity dismantled before them. Fathers stood in silence, knowing that silence itself was the safest allegiance. To speak was dangerous. To question was fatal. The condemned were paraded through the streets, shackled and dragged, their bodies already bruised from the lash, their dignity stripped away before the blade touched skin. Stones were thrown, spittle rained down, curses filled the air. The people were not merely spectators. They were participants in this ritual of degradation. For the crown required not only obedience of action, but obedience of thought. To see a nobleman in chains, to see a knight brought low, was to be reminded that no man, no matter his birth or title, stood above the sovereign's will. It was in this brutal theater of punishment that the name Sir Alexander Home would rise, not as a hero, but as an example. A lord once armored in pride, now condemned in chains. His crime, rebellion against the authority of James I of Scotland. His punishment, to lose not only his life, but every vestige of honor he once possessed. He was not a common thief plucked from the shadows of an alley. He was a man of land and blood, a commander who had dared to question the king. But rebellion was a word with only one conclusion, and treason a charge that left no defense. And so the sentence was passed, death by the axe. Yet death was never simple. It was never swift. The scaffold was not designed for mercy, but for spectacle. Before the blade, there would be humiliation. Before the stroke, there would be torment. Sir Alexander Home would be dragged through the streets of Edinburgh, his chains clattering against stone, his once proud figure reduced to a spectacle of disgrace. He would be spat upon by those who once bent the knee, struck with stones by peasants whose lives he once ruled. The garments of a knight were stripped away, replaced with rough cloth and iron shackles. His dignity was taken piece by piece until only the condemned man remained. This was justice in the Middle Ages, a justice that was never blind, never impartial. It was sharp-eyed and cruel, wielded as a weapon by those who ruled. It was designed not merely to punish the guilty, but to terrify the innocent, to remind every soul watching that obedience was survival and disobedience was death. And so, the story of Sir Alexander Home begins not with the clang of sword against shield, not with the banners of rebellion raised high, but with the sound of chains against cobblestone, with the jeers of a crowd hungry for his fall. His end would not be a private matter whispered in courts. His end would be a spectacle carved in blood upon the scaffold, a performance stage for all Scotland to witness. In this age of merciless justice, death was not the end. Death was the message, and Alexander Home was about to become its messenger. Scotland, the year 1410. A land scarred by centuries of conflict, its hills echoing with the cries of clans and the clash of steel. Overhead, the sky is gray, heavy with the promise of rain, a land as restless as the people who walk upon it. Into this fractured kingdom steps James I, the long-absent king. Taken in boyhood and held captive in England for nearly 2 decades, he has returned not as a familiar son of Scotland, but as a ruler hardened by foreign chains. To some he is the rightful sovereign restored. To others he is a stranger upon the throne, carrying with him the shadow of English influence. The crown, once tarnished, now gleams with new purpose. James seeks to bind his kingdom in iron. He looks upon the fractured clans, the feuding lords, the rebellious barons, and he sees not allies, but threats. His reign will not be gentle. His justice will not be patient. He has returned to make Scotland kneel. But Scotland has never knelt easily. Among the lords who bristle at this new authority stands Sir Alexander Home. Heir to a noble line, his blood carries the weight of tradition, his name the echo of centuries of pride. For him, obedience is not natural. Submission is not destiny. Where James demands loyalty, Home feels only the fire of defiance. And so the whispers begin. In the stone halls of castles, by the dim light of flickering torches, men gather to speak of resistance. Oaths are sworn in hushed voices, hands laid upon steel as vows are made to oppose the king's hand. These are not nameless men from the shadows of villages. These are knights and lords, men of title and lineage, who believe the crown seeks not justice, but domination. He was no common thief, no nameless criminal. He was a lord, a commander. But in the eyes of the crown, rebellion was treason, and treason demanded blood. The banners of rebellion rise like storm clouds. Across muddy fields, soldiers march with clenched jaws and restless eyes. Steel clashes in sudden skirmishes, the cries of war echoing against the walls of ancient castles. The land itself seems to hold its breath as brother turns against brother, as subjects defy their sovereign. But the crown is relentless. James I, hardened by his years in captivity, rules not with leniency but with calculation. His army, disciplined and merciless, advances step by step. Castle gates crack under the weight of siege engines. Rebellion banners, once bold, are torn from the walls and cast into the mud. The whispers of defiance are drowned beneath the thunder of royal authority. One by one, the rebels fall. Some flee into the wild hills, hunted like animals. Others are dragged from burning halls, their defiance beaten from them in chains and smoke. The promise of resistance, so fierce in whispers, collapses beneath the crushing weight of the king's power. And at the center of it all stands Sir Alexander Home, commander, rebel, betrayer in the eyes of the crown. For a time he stands proud, his name a rallying cry for those unwilling to bend. But no defiance endures forever. The hand of James I is long, and his wrath is steady. Captured, bound in iron, Alexander Home's fate is no longer in his own hands. The rebellion has ended, not with victory, not with compromise, but with silence. The silence of defeat, the silence of chains. And so it was written. The rebellion of lords was no different than the crime of thieves. The crown made no distinction. Treason was treason, and treason demanded blood. Sir Alexander Home, heir of a proud line, would not be remembered as a commander, nor as a lord. He would be remembered as an example, a warning, a head for the scaffold. The fires of rebellion sputter out. Smoke rises from razed strongholds. The roads are littered with the broken shields of those who dared to resist. In the distance, the royal banners fly, unyielding, unchallenged, victorious. And with them, the fate of Alexander Home is sealed. The night is long, and the night is cruel. In the bowels of a fortress dungeon, beneath stone walls blackened by centuries of damp, Sir Alexander Home waits. He does not wait for mercy, for he knows none will come. He waits for the dawn, a dawn that will not bring light, but the axe. The torches sputter in their brackets, smoke curling upward, staining the ceiling with soot. Their light is feeble, flickering against the damp stones, casting shadows that crawl like specters across the floor. Iron cuffs dig into his wrists, their edges biting into torn flesh. Each movement sends a shudder of pain up his arms, yet the chains allow him no rest. His body trembles, not from fear, but from exhaustion, from wounds sustained in battle, and from the cruelties inflicted since his capture. The marks of torment are written across him like scripture. His ribs ache with every breath, bones cracked beneath the boots of jailers. His flesh carries the burn of hot irons, the scars still weeping with blood and pus. The stench of sweat and rot clings to him, a cloak of degradation heavier than the chains that bind him. Once he was a knight armored in steel, riding at the head of men. Now he is reduced to this, a broken body in a cell of stone, waiting to be unmade. Outside the bars, the laughter of guards pierces the silence. They jest about his fall, about the nobility stripped bare. They mock his titles once spoken with respect, now twisted into curses. Their cruelty is not born of hatred, but of habit, another part of the ritual that reduces a man to nothing before the blade takes him. To the crown, he is no longer Alexander Home, no longer lord, no longer commander. He is already a corpse awaiting the final act. Beside him, a priest whispers prayers. The words, soft and trembling, rise into the darkness like smoke from a dying candle. Yet even in prayer there is resignation. The priest does not speak of salvation, only of surrender, for he knows the law of kings is stronger than the mercy of heaven in this place. The cell is filled not with hope, but with inevitability. And Alexander Home knows it. His lips tremble, not with pleading, but with exhaustion. He has no prayers left, no words of defiance, no speeches of rebellion, only silence. Through the rusted bars, his eyes stare into the void, unblinking, unflinching. It is not courage, nor is it terror. It is the simple understanding that tomorrow his name will no longer belong to him. It will belong to the crown. It will be spoken not as honor, but as warning. For this is the power of the scaffold. The crown would not only kill him, it would make of him a lesson. His death would not be private, nor simple. It would be painted in agony, performed before the multitude, etched forever into the memory of Scotland. His fall would not end with the axe. It would continue in every whisper of his name, in every child told to remember the price of treason, in every noble forced to swallow their pride beneath the weight of fear. The night drags on. The torches gutter and die one by one, leaving the dungeon in darkness. Outside, the city sleeps uneasily, aware that dawn will bring blood. Inside, the chains bite deeper, holding him fast. And still, he waits, breathing, bleeding, broken, but not yet gone. This is the long night of chains, the night before the end, the night where hope is smothered and silence becomes the final companion. The morning breaks gray and cold, as if the heavens themselves refuse to shine upon what is about to unfold. The air is thick with frost, the ground damp with dew, and in the heart of the city the scaffold rises like a monument of terror. Built of heavy timbers, stained black by the blood of countless souls before, it looms over the square like a grim altar. Each plank is a relic of suffering, each nail a witness to cries long since silenced. And yet, the people come. They always come. From every corner of the city they surge forward, drawn not by curiosity, but by compulsion. For in this age executions are sermons, and every subject must hear. The peasants gather in rough cloaks, their faces gaunt with hunger, their eyes wide with dread. Nobles stand apart, their silks and furs offering no shield from the cold, nor from the reminder that rank cannot spare one from the axe. Soldiers form a ring of steel, their armor gleaming, their expressions unreadable, as though the spectacle is as routine as drill. Priests weave through the throng, clutching rosaries, their lips moving with prayers that mingle with the smoke of incense. All are united by one thing, the promise of blood. From the shadows of the prison comes the sound of chains. Sir Alexander Home is dragged forward, his footsteps heavy, his wrists bound in iron. The clatter of shackles against stone echoes louder than the murmur of the crowd. His face is pale, drained by nights of torment, yet his gaze remains unbroken. There is no triumph in his eyes, but neither is there surrender. He stumbles once, beaten upright by the guards, and is thrust upon the wooden platform where so many before him have breathed their last. Above him the executioner waits, a towering figure clad in rough leather, his face shadowed, his hands steady. Before the eyes of the crowd he sharpens his great sword, the rasp of steel upon whetstone reverberating through the silence like distant thunder. The sound is not merely preparation, it is ritual. Each scrape declares what is to come, Each stroke assures the people that the crown's will is sharp, precise, and absolute. A herald steps forward, his voice loud and merciless, carrying across the square. Treason against King James, rebel, betrayer. The words are not a statement. They are a condemnation carved into the air itself. With every syllable, Alexander Home is stripped further of his identity. He is no longer a lord, no longer a commander, no longer even a man. He is treason incarnate, an offense to the crown, a lesson to all who dare to dream of defiance. The crowd reacts as one body, surging with sound. Some roar with approval, their voices sharp with hatred or fear, disguised as loyalty. Others whisper hurried prayers, their words trembling, desperate to ward off the curse of proximity to rebellion. Children cling to their mothers' skirts, their young eyes filled with images they will carry into adulthood. The scaffold, the chains, the man brought low. Old men murmur beneath their breath, not in condemnation, but in lamentation. For the death of a lord is more than the death of one man. It is the death of hope, the reminder that no lineage, no tradition, no pride can withstand the iron hand of kings. The square holds its breath. Before them stands not merely Alexander Home, but the embodiment of resistance crushed. The scaffold looms, the executioner waits, and the cold morning air hangs heavy with inevitability. This is not justice. This is theater, and the stage has been set for the final act. The moment has come. The scaffold, the crowd, the crown, all converge upon this single breath of time. Sir Alexander Home, once a lord of Scotland, now reduced to a prisoner in chains, is forced to his knees. The wood beneath him is cold, slick with the remnants of those who came before, a silent reminder that the block does not forget. Guards press him downward, their hands iron upon his shoulders. His head is lowered to the stained timber, pressed hard so that he cannot look upon the sky. His gray hair, once combed beneath the helm of a knight, falls loose around his face, unkempt and wet with sweat. His lips move in silence, not in rebellion, not in argument, but in prayer. Words unheard, words perhaps unfinished, vanish into the chill air. It is not a plea for life. He knows that life has already left him. It is a plea for remembrance, for his soul to be carried where the king's justice cannot reach. The crowd stands transfixed, held in the grip of dread and fascination. Mothers hush their children, some turning their faces away, others forcing them to watch, believing the lesson must be seen. Men murmur of fate, of treason, of the fragility of power. Some cheer, eager for the spectacle, their shouts carrying more bravado than loyalty. And through it all, silence hovers, fragile as glass, waiting for the shatter. Above him, the executioner raises the great sword. Its edge gleams in the cold morning light. Honed for this moment, kissed by whetstone and blood alike, he lifts it high, his muscles taut, his shadow cast long across the scaffold. For a breath, all things pause. Even the wind seems to die. Even the crows above fall silent. It is as if the world itself waits, balancing upon the edge of steel. And then, the blade descends. It crashes through flesh and bone in a single merciless stroke. The sound is wet, final, undeniable. A gasp erupts from the crowd, sharp as thunder, as though the entire city breathes in horror together. Blood arcs into the air, sprays across the scaffold, darkens the timber already blackened by countless ends before. The smell of iron fills the square, mingling with incense, with smoke, with the memory of prayers unspoken. The body slumps forward, chains clattering as though mocking his fall. What was once a man is now divided. Flesh here, head there, dignity scattered with the crowd's breath. And then, in ritual as old as the scaffold itself, the executioner seizes the severed head by its hair and lifts it high. The face of Sir Alexander Home stares blankly, lips parted as if frozen on the verge of words that will never be spoken. His eyes, emptied of life, now serve another purpose: to meet the gaze of the living. Every soul in the square is forced to look, to see, to remember. The executioner turns, presenting the head like an offering to the crown, a trophy of fear raised against the gray sky. And so Alexander Home was ended, not as a man, but as a warning. His head, once crowned with the pride of a lord, became nothing more than a trophy of fear. The crowd erupts again. Some jeer, spitting curses at the name already broken. Others cross themselves in terror, whispering prayers that their own fate might never meet the same steel. Old men lower their eyes, unable to endure the sight of nobility undone. Children weep, not fully understanding, yet knowing that they have seen something that will haunt their sleep. The sword drips red, the block drinks deep. The city stands silent for a moment longer, as though even the stones themselves have absorbed the lesson. Rebellion is treason, and treason is death. This is the fate of Sir Alexander Home. Not a man remembered for his deeds, not a commander remembered for his battles, but a head upon a scaffold, his legacy reduced to silence and fear. The deed is done. The body lies still, the blood has dried, but the punishment does not end upon the scaffold. For in this age, death is not enough. Death must be displayed. Death must be paraded. And so the head of Sir Alexander Home, once a lord of Scotland, is lifted high once more, mounted upon a cruel iron spike. Through narrow streets it is carried, past merchant stalls and church steps, past homes shuttered in fear. The people do not cheer. They do not rejoice. They watch in silence, their eyes averted, their lips moving with prayers that taste of ashes. Some cross themselves quickly as the grisly sight passes, afraid that even a glance might invite suspicion of sympathy. Mothers pull their children close, whispering warnings. Look away, lest you forget what happens to those who defy a king. At the city gates, the grim ritual reaches its end. The head is fixed upon the spike, raised against the gray horizon. Its eyes, once lit with fire, now stare blankly across the land, forever frozen in the moment of death. The wind tugs at strands of hair. The crows circle above, their cries sharp and merciless, as though mocking both the fallen and the living alike. Day after day, the people pass beneath that gaze, forced to look upon the ruin of rebellion carved in flesh. And yet, silence is never absolute. Beneath the hush of obedience, whispers endure. In taverns thick with smoke and fear, men lower their voices, speaking his name not with loyalty, but with a dangerous kind of reverence. In cottages where peasants huddle against the cold, mothers retell the story of his fall. To the crown it is punishment, but to the poor it becomes defiance, a parable of pride against tyranny. Even in the churches, where priests dare not speak aloud, his fate lingers in the prayers of those who wonder whether justice is truly written in blood. The scaffold claimed his body, the crown claimed his honor. But memory is never obedient. Memory slips through bars, through decrees, through the iron hand of kings. What was meant to terrify begins instead to inspire. What was meant to silence becomes an echo, carried on the wind, growing louder in secret places where the king's eyes cannot reach. And so the question lingers, heavier than the sword, sharper than the axe. How many more heads must fall before the land finds peace? How many more lords, how many more sons must bleed upon the scaffold before the kingdom learns that fear cannot rule forever? The camera pulls back. The city shrinks beneath gathering storm clouds. The streets seem smaller, the people frailer, their lives pressed beneath the weight of unseen chains. Beyond the walls, the fields stretch cold and empty, as though the land itself grieves. And at the gates, high upon the spike, the severed head of Sir Alexander Home remains, blank, sightless, yet unyielding. A grim sentinel watching over a kingdom built not on loyalty, but on terror. It stares out across Scotland, its silence heavier than sermons, its emptiness louder than any decree. It does not speak, and yet it speaks endlessly. It declares that rebellion is crushed, that power is absolute. But it also whispers another truth, one the crown cannot silence, that memory endures, that defiance survives, that fear may break the body, but never wholly claim the soul.